Well, they're definitely scared of this whole intelligence minion background, and we know these agencies mainly recruit for higher-level positions out of families. Go over the basic spectrum of the intelligence background connections in his family.
Well, let's start with his grandparents. Stanley Armour Dunham, his grandfather, ostensibly was in World War II, was in France, comes back to the United States and works for a series of furniture stores in Oklahoma, in Kansas, and in Washington State, and then he all of a sudden goes to work for one in Hawaii. I mean, you could maybe see that with chain furniture stores, but let's look at the time frame. He was going from one store to another. They were not part of like the Levitt's furniture chain. This looks like a military transfer, but I would suggest it was an intelligence agency transfer from place to place. He doesn't show up in Washington State until 1956. With the daughter, Obama's mother is enrolled in high school there. The word is that potentially he and his wife, Madeline Dunham, were working for the Office of Strategic Services in Beirut, starting in 42 until about 56. We know that things were getting dicey in Lebanon. 1958, President Eisenhower sent the Marines in there, stormed ashore, occupied the country for about a year. So it would make sense for them to get their daughter out of there, to get the agents who had families out of country. Shows up in Seattle and Mercer Island, and then a few years later, boom, he pops up as a furniture store salesman in Honolulu. That Pratt Furniture, by the way, only exists in corporate records. It was not a brick and mortar store in Honolulu. There's no record of a Pratt.
His cover is a furniture salesman.
Absolutely, and he wouldn't be the only one. I think we all know Julia Child worked for the OSS and CIA before she went to work for the OSS during World War II. She worked for a furniture store in Manhattan. So this is seems to be fairly standard. Kind of odd. Why furniture stores? Maybe it's because they move large amounts of goods.
It's also nondescript. It doesn't really ring a bell.
Yes,
people know to watch journalists and nature photographers and Christian groups of mercenaries. They don't think about furniture. But then we get into other parts of the family. It's on record they're working for high-powered groups.
Oh, right. And let's look at the CIA's use of anthropologists. His mother, ostensibly an anthropologist.
That's one of their favorite because they go into the most rural areas.
Absolutely. Now that's called the human terrain system, which they send these people out to basically just parse people, different tribes, ethnic groups, for targeting purposes.
If they ever need to play people off against each other, they've already got to.
Absolutely, and this has been going on for a long time. It was done with the OSS. By the way, we get to the OSS during World War II. An OSS agent also worked for British intelligence, who was an anthropologist, worked extensively in South America. His last name was Clothier. He was from the Strawbridge and Clothier department store family in Philadelphia. So here we get back to the stores, the merchandise activities again. Another one was connected to the Lothrop family that ran Woodward and Lothrop department store in Washington. So there seems to be Well,
that goes back to the Dutch and British East India Company, where they had their intelligence officers on the trading ships. That was their entree into the interiors of what South America, Central America, Africa, Asia, Dutch East Indies.
Absolutely. We have people going out to purchase obviously goods to be sold in these stores in the United States. It's great cover, and it seems like OSS and CIA used that to a great extent. So the idea that Stanley Armour Dunham's cover was a furniture store guy, salesman, is not all that bizarre. It seems at first glance it looks bizarre.
But we see how he's all over the world. Continue.
All over the world. Also, the reports that he may have taken Obama's mother to Cuba at the onset of the Cuban Revolution, circa 1960.
Wow, continue with the rest of the family.
Okay, we have Madeline Dunham, the grandmother, one of the first female vice presidents of the Bank of Hawaii. Unbelievable rise for somebody where we still had the glass ceiling in management positions for many women. She rises to vice president. She's in charge of escrow accounts for the Bank of Hawaii. Clearly, the Bank of Hawaii was used by several CIA front activities as a pass-through to pay off various dictators during her entire time at the Bank Bank of Hawaii. We had the Nugan Hand Bank, which was a CIA front that replaced by another operation in Honolulu after Nugan Hand collapsed. These were CIA activities, and the Bank of Hawaii was facilitating, and she was right in the middle of it all.
It's like pre-BCCI, and we know the history of the banks you just mentioned. Continue.
We have now Lolo Soetoro. Again, his history is being reinvented in this New York Times piece. Lolo Soetoro marries Obama's mother in March of 1965. In May of 65, he's called back because he's a reserve officer in the Indonesian Army. Suharto wants to get all these reservists back to help plan the coup. In the article in the New York Times, it states that Lolo Soetoro was called back and conscripted in the military. Now, conscripted means to go in as an enlisted man, and that they was sent to fight rebels in West New Guinea, getting him out of Java entirely, where, of course, Obama's mother shows up in 1967. Then they're painting this whole thing that, Suharto comes in and he creates this sort of Indonesian Prague Spring. This is fake history. This did not happen. We look at...
If you were a communist or a liberal, they hunted you down and blew your head off.
There are about 800,000 to 1 million people were killed there. Ethnic Chinese, too, because...
And it turns out that's Obama's dad's specialty in Africa, is posing as a commie and finding the folks to wipe
Absolutely.
out. And then it's Obama's specialty. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, we have Barack Sr., of course, who comes over. The thing that's common is the East-West Center at the University of Hawaii, a CIA front known to be Lolo Soetoro, Barack Obama Sr., both at that East-West Center, known to be a CIA front. He's sent eventually back to Kenya to try to get him into the Kenyan government because he's the wrong tribe. He's in a significant minority tribe, but not the dominant tribe. He does not get in to be the finance minister. So here we have President Obama saying he wanted to be prime minister of Indonesia. Had his father, or his alleged father, become, say, the president of Kenya, Barack Obama, our president, could very well be the president of Kenya today. Certainly the son...
The point is they were positioning him all over. Absolutely. He was like a skeleton key.
Absolutely. So, what country do you want to be leader of, President Obama? It sounds like you had 3 shots at being president of some country. Prime Minister of Indonesia, president of Kenya, potentially, but now president of the United States.
And the intelligence connections continue. I've read connections with his father in Kenya to British intel. We know they were all over Kenya.
Well, we see the father brought over in 1960 on the Airlift Africa project. That was an attempt to try to compete with the Soviet Union that created the People's Friendship University in Moscow. In 1961, they renamed that Patrice Lumumba University because the CIA knocked him off in Congo that year. So we see Barack Sr. coming over on the CIA-funded. They even got some money from the Joseph Kennedy Foundation to help with that. So we see him coming in, but then that marriage fritters away. It looks like Barack Obama's mother was actually being introduced by her father, to all these potential third world leaders, movers and shakers. I mean, what kind of father would basically have...
What do they call those? Honeypot, a swallow?
Yeah, well, honeypot, but he's, his daughter's like 18 years old, and he's introducing her to all these people from these various, Barack Sr. certainly, and she gets pregnant, and... well,
that's like Clinton's mother was an admitted prostitute.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you got kind of wonder what kind of family was this to, especially, and of course the big thing is Barack Sr. and Dunham meet at a Russian language class at the University of Hawaii in 1960. Now, who's taking Russian during the height of the Cold War? This is at the height of the U-2 situation, and it's Eisenhower transitioning to Kennedy. It's the height of the Cold War.
It just goes on for hours, all the intelligence connections.
Absolutely. You can keep peeling back this onion, and you'll still find more connections. And I mean, you can go back to the Bush family, and obviously, yeah, we know George H.W. Bush was CIA director. We know he was in Dallas during the when the Kennedy.
It's now been declassified. He was in the CIA before he said he was.
Absolutely. They
didn't just make him director,
right? But we kind of knew that from documents that finally. But with Obama, we have all these gaping holes. It's like,
well, see, that's that left cover. I mean, when it comes out he's CIA, that is going to really destroy the myth of the messianic, little surfer boy.
Oh, absolutely. This whole idea that, again, in the New York Times article, they say that the Obamas, the Sotoros, were living in a very poor neighborhood. They had to hunt wild boar to get something on the table. They lived in the Menteng district, which at the time was the brand new diplomatic kind of compound for the diplomats and the high-level government officials. What are they talking about?
So they've got the Swiss Family Robinson thing going for him.
Yeah.
Why don't they just say he came from Krypton and landed in a flying saucer?
I think he's even joked about that himself.
Yeah, we do have a clip of that.
It's just amazing to see how the New York Times and the White House are working together to rewrite his history.
And that's why you were told, or you're guessing that's why you're getting threats from the White House?
I assume because the initial threat was passed to me by, it was an allied nation, but it was in Asia, and it's a country that keeps a close eye on Indonesia, so they know what's going on there. They keep their ears open. And also, it was confirmed to me by an Indonesian source who talked to a State Department official here that, he's marked. There are Indonesian connections to the threats, or at least Asian connections, and in one case specifically Indonesian threat.
So they're really worried about you getting over to Indonesia. We'll be right back, folks. This is very important information.